Artolavan looked every bit of his more than 80 years that day, slumped behind his desk, his skin sagging, his eyes dull and weary. Even his sparse, white hair seemed thinner and lifeless. He glanced up, as did his attendants, when Pinniwer rushed in unannounced. "Wounded arrived from the battles," Pinniwer said, gasping for breath. "Many." Artolavan exchanged concerned looks with his attendants. "The rumours of the fighting in Polcree?" one of those younger brothers remarked, for indeed they had heard only a few days before that two great forces were closing in on the small village from opposite ends and were sure to meet in bloody battle. Polcree wasn't far from Chapel la Belle, barely a day's hard ride, and if these reports were to be confirmed by the arrival of the wounded this day, it would mark by far the closest any of the heavy fighting had come to Chapel la Belle. "Many?" Father Artolavan asked. "More than all of those wounded we have seen cumulatively," Brother Pinniwer replied. He could not be certain if that was technically true, but it certainly seemed so from the view on the wall. The old man rubbed a hand across his weathered and wrinkled face and with great effort pulled himself up from his chair. The nearest attendant brother offered an arm of support, but the proud Artolavan brushed it away and moved from around his desk. "If there are men of Polcree among their ranks, it would not do to keep them here," Brother Pinniwer reasoned. "I know our agreement, but they are too close to home. I would fear retribution or attempts at escape." Artolavan paused and nodded, flashing a yellow smile at young Pinniwer. "You look better since you were put in charge of handling the prisoners," he said, a rare compliment from the man known as the father of the Order of a Bell. "Some of that paleness is lost retreating from your cheeks." Pinniwer shifted uneasily from foot to foot, not even beginning to know how to respond. "So, too, have you realized the confidence to speak of such policy in a room full of your superiors?" said Artolavan. Brother Pinniwer's shoulders slumped, fearing that he had overstepped his authority here. He glanced around at the older monks, all of whom were staring at him. "We need such confidence in these dark times, Brother Pinniwer," said Artolavan, and several of the others cracked smiles that put Pinniwer at ease. "I have watched you grow beyond my expectations through this time of crisis." Pinniwer felt his face blush fiercely. "Crisis," Artolavan repeated, suddenly sounding like he was tired. So very tired. Artolavan and the warring lairds had worked out a compromise to allow the various chapels of the Order of a Bell, particularly the immense Chapel la Belle, to be used by both sides in the ongoing and escalating war between Laird Delaval and Laird Ethelbert as a neutral repository for the many prisoners taken on the field, and, of course, as a point of medical care for all the wounded of either side. That was the best role for the Order of a Bell, Artolavan had rightly decided, a way to bring some manner of order and peace to a land ravaged by continuing war. Thus, Chapel la Belle had become a dumping ground for prisoners from both the warring lairds, Ethelbert of the southeasternmost holding of Honce, Ethelbert dos Entel, and Delaval, the most prominent and powerful laird in all the land, who ruled the strategic and fortified city at the southernmost navigable spot on the great river, the Mazur Delaval. Scores of prisoners, hundreds even, had come into the increasingly vast complex of Chapel la Belle over the last months. Brother Pinniwer had been the one assigned to oversee them, to heal their wounds, to put them to work, and to ensure that this encampment of opposing sides had remained secure and peaceful. His work had earned him praise from Artolavan and many of the other older brothers, and the young Pinniwer had felt as if his contribution here had been in the truest spirit of the tenets of a bell. He used those thoughts to bolster his courage at that moment, for he knew that this day would be different. Of the prisoners who had come in before today, few had been seriously wounded. The battles had been so far off that any soldiers grievously injured had not survived the long and arduous journey. Thus, before today, most coming to Chapel la Belle had suffered only minor wounds or no wounds at all. They were simply prisoners who, in return for their lives, had taken an oath that their stake in the fighting had ended and they would serve out the end of the war in hard labor. Instead of killing their Honce brothers, who happened to be fighting on the side of the other laird, Delaval's men would toil for the monks and their never-ending construction on this, the greatest chapel, perhaps the greatest complex in the known world. "Which banner, Ethelbert or Zelaval?" Artolivan asked, his voice slurring as if he had been drinking. He had not. "I could not discern, father, but likely both, I believe, by the sheer number of men involved." Artolivan and the senior brothers exchanged looks again, but this time of doubt. Someone had won, and someone had lost, and while many of the wounded would no doubt be men of both lairds, the prisoners who would remain behind in civil captivity would be of one faction or another.